Kevin Robinson is going to be on the panel. I would like to invite back Eric McLaughlin from Intel as well, and also Robert Stacey from Intel. Okay, so I think we need one more mic. Let's take care of this.
Oh, need a mic?
Is there any other one? Or yeah, let's take this one. We'll take this one. Okay. I'll do a shortcut. Okay, fantastic. So I think you have heard from Kevin and from Eric. So I would like firstly to introduce our guests. And first of all, congratulations on your recent appointment. I know it's not a major change, but why don't you tell us about your role and then your history?
Sure. So my name is Robert Stacey. I'm the brand new chair of 802.11. Most of you probably know Dorothy Stanley. She was the previous chair. She ran our group for about 6 years. I'm taking over now. And I understand that Dorothy attended these meetings quite regularly. And so I hope that I can do the same thing.
No, fantastic. And glad to have you. And what I would like to say is that the topic of this panel, and I was sharing with Diego and Sarah, is really business opportunities with Wi-Fi 7. And how can we make it differently? And when we were preparing, what I would like to say is, hopefully we'll have neutral perspectives. So Eric works with any AP vendor. So Robert gets inputs from all the parties to get the standards work. And then, of course, Kevin is on the edge of creating certification that cater to so many opportunities. So why don't we start with, okay, so we had these Wi-Fi generations evolving. Some industry players say we are going a bit too fast. So how can we justify all these new features to create a business opportunity given all the prevalence of Wi-Fi? So maybe let's start with Eric and we just go around.
Well, I think, first of all, things have been moving fast the last few years, right? You bring in Wi-Fi 6, you add 6E with new spectrum, you add 7 with all the new capabilities to drive, the lower latencies, more deterministic behaviors. But my perspective when people ask me this question is that it was needed, right? We needed to go down this path. Wi-Fi had been a contention-based protocol for a long time. It did work, but it didn't work in the way we needed. And as we see the use cases that are being driven anymore, as some of the speakers showed, it's being used in medical activities. It's being used in industrial. And for us, we've been doing, Bart was talking about gaming. We've been doing Wi-Fi gaming for a long time at Intel Extreme Masters, with our solutions. So, these kinds of applications and with Wi-Fi 7 open business opportunities in places where Wi-Fi was previously not expected to go.
Perfect.
Well, I would just say that, we can always do with more throughput and more capacity. Capacity equals reliability. The more capacity you have in the network, the more reliable you can make it. So yeah, we just have to continue innovating. One of the key aspects of Wi-Fi 7 is the multi-link, which is another way to think about it is sort of utilizing spectrum more efficiently, using the bits of spectrum that we have access to, sort of accommodating interference, accommodating other users of the band. And so Wi-Fi 7 is just further doing that. It's enhancing reliability.
And I guess one thing I would add is that it's a point I often make that because Wi-Fi is completely backwards compatible, the reality is the upgrade cycle is something that at the end of the day, the customer makes that decision, right? Like I decide to upgrade my home access point, the service provider decides whether to do a refresh, the enterprise, et cetera. And some of them are on like refresh cycles, but the fact is when they're making that decision to go to Wi-Fi 7, it's because of those applications like you talked about, Eric. They're getting real benefit and value from doing that, or else they wouldn't be doing it. So I think it's a great market signal that the market does see, particularly the determinism, a lot of things we're able to do now with Wi-Fi 7 that is really driving that interest in it. So we always hear that point like, oh, you're going so fast. It's like, well, do you want us to go slower? And most are like, well, no, but I want that thing, right? And so that's ultimately what's driving it.
Yeah, I was gonna add on your slide of devices, we have over 200 PC designs shipping Wi-Fi 7 certified today, right? So huge upswing across all segments in delivering Wi-Fi 7.
Yeah, it's interesting because definitely the speed is evolving, and like you said, there are some disruptive features. And we were looking to some reports, and ITU is saying that 83% of all traffic is fixed. Ofcom is saying that 65% of the time people is connected to the Wi-Fi, so it's pretty successful, and it looks like folks are already making use of the latest generations. So do you think there is an angle when you have all this uptake on the fixed side, when we think about conversions? Let's say, is there a business opportunity now with Wi-Fi 7 that we can paint a picture that it converges even more with any, I don't know, competing or complementary other wireless access?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. So I remember we were talking a few weeks or months ago, I guess it was, and we were talking about what's coming in 6G, and you asked me a question, if you were talking to 3GPP, what would you say? And my immediate response was, quit looking at Wi-Fi as the enemy. We're your friend, right? And like you said, 65 to 70% of all data traffic goes over Wi-Fi. And so, do I think there's more opportunity for convergence? Absolutely. Wi-Fi has really raised the game, especially with Wi-Fi 7, MLO, all these implementations we've done, and really much more closely matches the kind of behavior you should get on cellular, for example. So it's a very easy sell, and I think Derek's not here right now, but I think Derek's already taken advantage of that, right, in his implementations, and making sure that you can easily converge to technologies that have very similar performance characteristics.
Yeah, and to build on your point, Eric, because the quit treating us like frankly, both ecosystems need to quit treating each other like the enemy. I think many people don't do it that way, right? But there's certainly an element. But I would take it a step further and say, I think convergence is not just an opportunity. Frankly, it's an imperative, right? And I'm going to get the stat wrong, but Alex, our VP of Regulatory Affairs at our Austin meeting, was talking about the trend line in terms of how much time people in the US spend indoors. And it's not a pretty stat, right? It's something like approaching like 90% of our time is indoors now, right? And if it's an imperative, the fact is, there's not enough money in the world to deploy 5G or 6G in every home. And if we need to deliver these connectivity capabilities, really the only way to do it is through convergence, a seamless complementary nature of these two technologies. It's the only way that it's economically feasible. And we need to kind of get past some of the roadblocks and figure out, okay, what do we actually need to do when we need to start getting on with doing it?
Makes sense.
Maybe I could make a comment there, is that 3GPP and 802 have been converging quite a bit. 3GPP has moved away from their sort of flow-based architecture, moved to a more packet-based architecture. They depend a lot on 802 technologies, on Ethernet and so forth. And so there is, and we're converging on the same sort of QoS mechanisms. Yes. So there is a lot of convergence happening. Yeah.
No, Robert, I must agree, because whenever we see a Wi-Fi feature making into the stack of 3GPP or the standard, it's like, okay, there is some follow-up on some of those trends, and probably that brings the business opportunity for Wi-Fi that is to influence the other wireless access technologies. Yeah, maybe this is a good timing just to open up to the audience. Any challenges to our neutral panel? Anything in your mind regarding Wi-Fi 7 business that you would like to ask or comment upon? Okay, we have Kevin Franzen from AT&T. So let's just get you the mic, Kevin.
So we're doing a fair amount of MDU work these days. And one of the challenges that we have is with 6 gigahertz and WPA3, there's not a mechanism to have multiple passwords to join the same network. And I'm just hoping that that business case can be addressed at some point in the standards.
Yeah, I can comment a little bit on that. There is ongoing work on that. Yes, there's some work in the maintenance group trying to fix that particular problem, that specific problem. Yes.
Yeah, so it's about also solving some of the gaps and the business problems, and definitely all these inputs, we should take it and divide and conquer, as we typically say.
Yeah, and I would even say just in general, we're seeing more of a trend towards individual device credentials, whether it's like the Matter ecosystem that's just kind of where things are starting to go now, whether it's multiple passwords, so each person can get their own. There's different technical approaches, but I think it's encouraging to see that we're starting to move away from, one password for everybody in an entire environment. So hopefully that trend continues. And I think it will.
Yeah, so moving on, Maria, let's take one question from Maria. Yeah, maybe it's related, Maria, because we were having, this discussion with the operators in the WBA. So are you embracing, new generations of Wi-Fi? So Tiago announced we have now 7 operators actively looking into carrier Wi-Fi deployments. And something that always comes is, how can we prioritize some services over Wi-Fi, even the basic ones like voice, to always go through to justify some of my core business, that is voice and data. So do you think we are going into that direction and creating those type of advantages?
Yeah, so I can comment.
Sorry,
Now I can comment. So at least in the ecosystem that we serve primarily, we've absolutely recognized that there are certain types of things that you're doing on your device that need prioritization, right? Because how many people here do one thing at a time on their phone or their PC? None. Okay, yeah. So I don't know about you, but I generally have about 21 windows open and I'm working on multiple different things, but obviously always paying attention to Robert's call. But in those environments, prioritization is key, and we're doing that, right? So we know if you're on a voice call or a video call, you need to prioritize those experiences. If you're playing a game, that's what you want to prioritize. And so we see it in our ecosystem that we work in as a necessity, and I do think in these type of networks, we can easily figure out between the folks like, from AT&T and Intel and Wi-Fi Alliance, et cetera, we can figure out those handoffs that allow us to make sure those prioritization mechanisms through the QoS, connections make it work.
Yeah. Yes, should be a combined approach when just proposing this to the operators. And okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember the days when we had problems with voice over Wi-Fi, when scanning would, the scanner would go off and try and find a new AP, and in the meantime, your voice would break up and you couldn't communicate. But voice today on Wi-Fi is actually pretty good, very good.
Yep. Okay, so maybe we have a question from Maria. Can we? Yes, you have the mic. Perfect.
Yeah, it's actually on the convergence point and maybe the previous discussion, because you've mentioned there is a lot of work on convergence and things are progressing. But for the true, if you like, vision for convergence and the seamless experience that we've been talking about all morning, I would probably say there are 2 key barriers, okay, from my perspective. As an operator, I work for BT, by the way. Cost. So the cost of bringing Wi-Fi traffic over to what is still a very expensive mobile core is one killer. And having tunnels over tunnels and having to do that, even for voice over Wi-Fi, is already quite a barrier. The second one is the device behaviors. The device still wants to make ultimately the decision as to which network they connect to. So previous attempts like ANDSF and all the things that we've all been involved in have not really succeeded. Could you give us a view as to how we can do better as an industry to perhaps overcome those 2 issues?
Yeah, I'm not sure if, and maybe Maria, there is a twist because Wi-Fi is already cost effective and we are kind of trying to merge both worlds. So any comments or?
Well, I'm not going to speak to the piece about getting onto the operator's core, but in terms of the devices making the decisions, I'll go back to something that was said earlier. That's unlikely to change anytime soon. And part of it's just kind of in the DNA of Wi-Fi. But a lot of the work, for example, that we're doing with things like Wi-Fi data elements, and it's about getting devices the information they need to make the best possible decisions. right? So, at the end of the day, that's probably how we have to do it. They're going to take into account a lot of things. I mean, the devices are going to know, like you said, Eric, are you running gaming? Is the voice call the most important thing? And so there's a lot of information to consider in making that correct decision. But the more we can help the devices by, giving them information on the network and how it's performing and how other networks nearby are performing, what Matt talked about, potentially, hey, and where should I jump to? All of that, I think, helps devices make the best decision, which hopefully will end up in a better user experience.
Yeah, I think it's gradually improving. I mean, there is, the neighbor reports, for example, the multi-link framework itself will help evolve, improve network selection. It'll help with the make before break connections and things like that. So I wouldn't see radical change in the near future, but there's a gradual accumulation of new features that'll help with network selection and roaming in particular.
Yeah, I'll just add that I was earlier this week meeting with one of our customers, and that's the exact conversation we had, not necessarily the getting onto the core, but how, with all of the changes that are happening and where we sit, right, the OS level, the device level, the software layer, the Wi-Fi standards layer, the cellular standards layer, all of these things are changing regularly, rapidly, and that enables new capabilities at multiple places along the, from device to cloud. And so I think we are entering an era where QoS and other things are going to be discussed, not just in Wi-Fi and not just in cellular and not just in OS, but having to look at this end to end. And so I do think there may be some enhancements. I don't have any examples currently, but I think the conversations are definitely there, and that's the start.
Yeah, and definitely, Eric, alluding to that, our working groups have been trying, to scope the problem and have an end-to-end perspective. And I believe, for this roadmap definition, this will be one of the key topics. So,
one other thing comes to mind. Part of this, we've talked about AI a lot here today. One of the ways we're trying to think of AI is, what do we need to either fix, invent, or improve? And you start there, and then you figure out, how does AI help accelerate or solve, right, those problems? So as we think about the issues that you raised, we should probably be trying to create a framework, right, to determine where along this challenge is the right place to institute AI capabilities that will help us either accelerate, resolve, or invent those fixes.
I guess the last thing I was going to add is there's certain things that we may do in the future, like you said, having technology where we can actually make the second connection with one link before we break the other link and things like that. But there are a decent number of tools that exist today where we could have a better experience than we actually see in practice. And that's one of the things I had alluded to in my presentation, where the Alliance is doing a bit of a shift where we used to focus very much almost exclusively on, okay, what about the interoperability of the protocols, the control traffic, and making sure just the mechanisms are working right, but not as much into then how does that translate into an experience on a real network. So some of these events that we're doing, trials and sandboxes and things like that, is to now say, okay, the technologies have now made their way into commercial devices. Let's start putting those through their paces on very specific scenarios and identify, is there some commonality in why we're not getting the experience we expect to? And maybe then some of those learnings can start going back into connection managers and everything else to make it better. So that's at least one specific thing we're trying to do to fix the problem with the state of the art of the technology today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kevin, I think you shed a light on probably the trident that we have discussed here. So we started with Wi-Fi 7 flying solo, the business opportunities. Then we moved on to talk a bit about convergence, Wi-Fi plus other wireless access. And I think for this innovation business angle, I would like to get your opinions on what's coming next and how that can affect investments on Wi-Fi 7. So maybe two quick angles. One is Wi-Fi 8. So that is out. So there are presentations talking about Wi-Fi 8. Do you think that helps, that keeps the motivation on new generations? But what about investments? Are the CIOs going to wait for the next generation, or there's no risk? Not sure, maybe.
So for the next generation, more of the same, so more multi-link, enhancing multi-link to reduce latency, especially in roaming and some of the other scenarios. There's a focus on coexistence as well in .11, in 802 in general, with ultra wideband, Bluetooth in the 6 gigahertz band and stuff. There's a lot more radios appearing using the unlicensed spectrum. So there's a bit of a focus on coexistence, in-device coexistence and out-of-device coexistence in .11. So that's part of the future.
So continuation.
Continuation, yeah.
I mean, I would say, Eric, I mean, you're probably the best to say in terms of like, are people going to wait? I don't see people waiting, right? I mean, people are making investments. A lot of times they have, they're just their normal CapEx cycle, they're kind of their cycles they go through, they're buying. And, we're still talking about what Wi-Fi 8 is going to be. And you know what? There's going to be a Wi-Fi 9 eventually. So, I mean, you can kind of get a little bit spun around in this. Well, wait, do I wait for the next thing and the next thing? But the reality is many of the use cases that Wi-Fi 7 enables are use cases that matter to people now. They solve problems that people are experiencing right now. And so I don't see, a lot of discussion around, well, no, let's not do Wi-Fi 7 and wait for Wi-Fi 8, particularly when you add in the fact that if you have not already done an upgrade for 6 gigahertz by getting Wi-Fi 6E gear, that is a huge carrot to try to make that jump to Wi-Fi 7.
Yeah, I would just add that at least in the industries that we're in and track, there's a very natural progression of new technology, right? It comes in, if it's got utility, for the year one, it's 10-15% of our mix. Year two, it's 30 to 40% of our mix. Year three, it crosses 50% of our mix, right? So I think that will always continue as long as we're bringing useful new features and capabilities in the standard. But I do think if you look at some of what's coming, right? Sensing, for example, it's going to get better and better. We have a really simple feature on our laptop, so we show it to people, and they're like, "Wow!" You can walk up to the laptop, it gets the lock screen from a sleep state, right? You walk away from the laptop, and it closes it down and locks it. Really simple. That's just Wi-Fi sensing, right? It knows that you're there. It knows that you go, and so the sensing is going to get better and going to create tons of use cases. And when you add, bigger bandwidths and potentially millimeter wave Wi-Fi in the future, those things open up so much context and so much data that, I think business cases and adoption rates are going to go up.
Yeah. No, very interesting, Eric. And maybe on a final note, you mentioned sensing. And on this business perspective, we see that 6G movement has started. ITU just put out all the requirements. They include sensing, coverage, capacity, interoperability. So maybe a bit of a provocation here to Robert. Do you think IEEE 802.11 is going to submit a candidate for?
I don't think so. We're not a marketing organization. We focused on our technology. We'll keep our focus there. We'll keep our focus on the technology. We're not going to really participate in the marketing activities around IMTT.
We have the future proofing we need with this data. Okay, so I think we reached the end of the panel. Thank you so much for providing your neutral perspectives on Wi-Fi 7 business, and looking forward to continuing the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.